Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Nancy Drew. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, picking up where last week's episode left off with the whole situation where, Josh is alive and he's on the run. Because obviously, they ended up looking at some surveillance footage of him just kind of, going inside of that closet and waiting. I mean, granted, by the time they actually come back, actually check the closet, he's gone. So I guess at some point in time while everyone was moving around, he waited till no one's around and he just snuck through. But I just thought it was interesting because when you see him just kind of he just casually gets off the hook and walks away. You literally got electrocuted. How are you just fine and dandy? And part of me is like, did he get possessed or something? Or he's just that strong-willed about I'm not going to get... I mean, granted, there's enough spirits rolling around Horseshoe Bay that is kind of wouldn't be too surprised if he did get possessed or something like that. We'll have to wait and see. But obviously Nancy's in that position where she has to try and find anything that will clear her dad. Because obviously this is clearing up Tiffany's murder, but it still doesn't clear up everything about Lucy's murder. Obviously it's connected. So the whole point is all right, trying to get, Ryan captured. Because if they can prove Ryan is responsible, obviously it'll clear up her dad's name. But obviously he's on short on time because his next arraignment soon, or rather it's a hearing or whatever. And obviously, it could still be, he could be transferred to a different place waiting for his hearing or whatever the case may be. So Nancy's kind of on the clock. But for her dad, it's just kind of you literally got attacked by a killer. And the fact is she's no, I'm okay. She literally has to keep telling everyone she's okay. Because for her, it's I don't have time to be dealing with that. There's too much at stake here. My dad's life, his freedom is at stake. I can't take that chance. I mean, hell, he was literally, almost killed in prison. And if I don't she's probably worried that the Hudsons will try and hire someone to kill him in prison as well. So it's that whole situation of okay, so she feels she's up against the clock, so she has to push forward with this. Interesting timing considering it's the celebration of Horseshoe Bay, because basically these are when the first families came to Horseshoe Bay, or it's a celebration of Horseshoe Bay first being, because apparently the ship was actually supposed to be going to Virginia, but it landed here at Horseshoe Bay. One of the founding families up there was the Marvins, so showing that they have a long, deep-seated history with Horseshoe Bay, which I think is going to circle back into something really important later on, which I'll kind of remind myself to talk about. But the fact of the matter is, Nancy, has to, try and figure out okay, because obviously she brought this, the emails to Karen to use. Obviously at the same time, Nick and Ace are going with her. Nick is going because he wants to figure out how did Josh get the poison in the first place. That's still something he has to deal with. The person that was his boss as well as his friend, you were literally living in that garage. Turns out he was a murderer and he was there because obviously it sucks because this is someone you cared about who you thought of as a friend who murdered someone else you cared about and thought of as a friend. So it's a whole complicated thing. And obviously, Bess was talking about the fact of the matter is how I think it was how the celebrations were getting shut down because a serial killer's on the loose, and George had to be come on, yo, kind of read the room, Nick is here. And the fact of the matter is Ace is so anyone else want to just awkwardly change the quickly change the conversation. But nevertheless, they go, obviously Nancy gives the, files to Karen, and, Karen's go well, if you want to prove whether Ryan was really there or not, whether his alibi really came through or not, you basically talk to her roommate or something, which obviously that's something her and, Owen does, because Owen wants to kind of, help her in any shape or form. Which they end up tracking down a former roommate of his, which that actor, I've seen him in stuff before, the actor who plays his roommate. But I love the whole thing of oh yeah, you're bringing your, driving along with your assistant. And he's no, that's not my, and Nancy's yeah, I'm totally his assistant. And she's bringing up questions about Ryan. She did bring up some interesting thing where it's apparently Lucy broke up with Ryan, which I think is interesting because it makes it seem like Ryan's the one because you're sleeping around and stuff like that. So it might be a thing of initially she lied to say, she probably gave it an excuse of why she broke up with him. Maybe it was it's the fact is that maybe I'm sleeping with you. I think immediately my brain is thinking that was her doing it because his maybe both his parents, but more so his mom probably threatened Lucy. It's like, if you don't break things off with my son, it's going to be end badly. So, and then it's like, obviously Ryan came back, he was kind of messed up. There's a time frame where he could have stuck out and meet with Lucy, but he never did. Which part of me wonders, it's probably most likely what ended up happening is his mom probably manipulated him, probably sending him to the wrong address, or maybe she sent him there at the wrong time. So after Lucy was already dead, Ryan probably showed up, but she wasn't there because he was hoping probably like they could fix things and get back together. Because once again, I don't believe that email that was saying like let's meet was by Ryan. I believe that was by his mom. That's what I'm thinking. I could be mistaken, or it could be like one of his roommates who'd end up having access to his email, because didn't that roommate of his end up talking about the fact that it's like, oh yeah, like because didn't he have access to them as well? So that could have been something his mom, that Ryan's mom could have paid that situation off regardless. But obviously there's not enough to point that, it's like Ryan had it. There was enough time potentially. Well, no one, it was a long time ago, so it's like hard to really kind of judge because it was like 20 years ago. But the fact of the matter is there could have been enough time for Ryan to sneak off and meet with her and end up killing Lucy, because when he came back he ended up getting busted, because everyone else ended up getting busted too because of drinks and stuff like that. But I'm like, I don't know. I still feel like the fact is that she broke up with him, I think, is kind of important knowledge. I think that plays a very pivotal role, because even despite everything, remember what ended up happening? She ended up kissing Ryan, like when they met, like at that, party and stuff that Owen helped Nancy get into. That, so that makes me think like there's still something there, but she still kind of blames him because I think his family is responsible for her death. So we'll kind of get into that. So, but Nancy keeps having this vision of, Lucy, and Lucy's got like these bloody eyes. At one point Nancy like ended up spitting out her teeth in water, but then it turned out not to be her teeth. It wasn't real. It was once again inside her head. But then another time she has visions of a whole bunch of bones. So that's one side of things. But another angle to this whole situation was like, okay, so Owen goes with George and Bess to investigate how to the Aglica, because basically it's this thing like basically you stare into a mirror on this day and you can basically get one wish, which Ace is like, he wished for a PS3. He's like, I never got the PS3, but I wished for it. And it seems like everyone did. Like George got like a D in a class. She's like, I wanted a higher grade in that. Nancy kind of wanted some stuff too. So it's kind of a thing that hasn't really worked out, but it's like try to make this a thing that happened, because it's like Lucy's eyes were bleeding, meaning like maybe Aglica, which means she might have done the ritual that might have been like, hey, like because apparently like once your wishes come true, your eyes start bleeding, meaning that it's succeeded. So that must mean that Lucy must have made some kind of wish. What that wish is, we'll probably never know, or maybe we'll eventually find out. But nevertheless, like I said, Ace and Nick are looking into the poison situation. They end up talking to Ace's dad because he's there, because he's helping out with the investigation. Because I think it's also because his connection to the poison and everything, because he worked on the, God, what was her name? The murderer, the poisonous, like, obviously there's a similarity between her poison and Josh's poison. It's the actually exact poison. It was interesting too where Nick was like, oh, you actually know a little sign language. I think, did he say like he had a cousin that was deaf, so he ended up picking up a little bit. But I thought it was interesting while they were working on it, like Ace kept looking up, and it's like, right, he ends up talking about it later on, but he didn't like the fact that his dad's working with the cops again, because it's like things didn't end so well beforehand. So like after your accident, you promised you'd stop working with the cops, but for him it's like, I made that promise to you, Ace, when you were 6 years old. And for him, it's like, I was born for this. And Ace is like, if you're looking for my blessings, you'll be waiting a long time. Which he's like, I'm used to dealing with frustration. So they definitely had this very complicated relationship with it. It seems like his dad kind of has a hard time showing affection. It seems like that's kind of always been his issue. And I think for Ace, it puts him in that complicated thing of not really knowing what's on his dad's mind, or really like how his dad feels. Because like I said, it just seems like his dad's one of those guys that doesn't show he doesn't wear his heart on his sleeve, which like Ace heavily wears his heart on his sleeve, but it was an interesting turn of events looking into the poison, because the whole thing was like, okay, so when's the last time the killings happened? The last time the poison was used, it was in 2009. There were some previous cases where the poison was used, but it's like it couldn't have been an instant. Those cases couldn't have been connected, because the lady, she ended up modifying her poison and making it so that it would look like natural causes. The other victims looked like they were contorted and in pain, so that wasn't connected. So it's like, so how did Josh get to the poison any other means? But thanks to asking Ace's dad, it turns out the evidence had been moved at one point in time because the refrigerator was broken, so it needed to be moved somewhere else, meaning there was an opportunity for someone to steal it. And it turns out like so it was someone came in to fix it a week before Tiffany's murder. So that starts happening, but then Nancy shows up and they call and bring her up to speed about everything, and Nancy notices a signature and it's like, wait, what's up with this? So they end up breaking into the evidence room because they're not about to back away from this situation, and they find the poison. But the fact of the matter is Nancy's immediately like, this isn't a poison, because you look at the labeling on it, it's not for a label that's supposed to have been like 20 years old. There's no way that was the same label. It was super fresh. And she ends up breaking down the stuff chemically about the way it's designed and stuff like that. And the moment Karen shows up, it's like, whoa. It's like, hey, we're cool here. And then Nancy was like, you're the one behind this. I was like, wait, what? And it turns out she was. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it makes the most sense. Because what did, Nancy say? Like, you need to hear me out. You said that she was your best friend. I'm just trying to help. Nancy literally said it earlier in the episode. That was Josh's sister, but that was your best friend. And so Karen's trying to arrest her and everything because Nancy's like, this is water and everything. But Ace ends up drinking it because, he ends up talking about it later on. Because his dad was like, I don't know whether you drinking that poison was brave or stupid. He was like, neither. Because I know Nancy and he trusted whatever she said. So she said it was water. Ace wholeheartedly believed her, and trusted her. And he ends up drinking it. And, when, Nancy kind of confronts Karen about it, it's like, once again, it's understandable. She wanted justice for her friend because the Hudsons have always kind of escaped justice. So for her, this was the means of getting back at them. It's like, but at the same time, for Nancy, it's like, I get you wanted justice, but how is murdering someone justice? That's not the right way of going about this. Because of what you did, an innocent woman died. And on top of that, you put my dad in prison, which there's levels upon levels of how complicated and messed up this is. Karen was Nancy's mom's best friend. And at the same time, it's like her and Carson were having a thing. Obviously, that was a thing brought up earlier in the series. We never circled back to it, but they kind of comforted each other. So it makes it even more effed up that you would do that to someone you care about. But for her, it's like, because immediately my brain was like, wait, is that why you were so gung-ho when you're looking for Nancy's evidence? Because you were looking for a means to pour all this onto Carson, that he's the one responsible. But it turns out it's because of the evidence Nancy found, she was okay with Carson taking a fall for it, because it meant like, wait, you had something to do with it. Your fingerprints were on the knife and everything. So I guess that's why she didn't push to try and kill him or whatever. I mean, granted, she could have, but obviously the Hudsons already covered that for trying to kill, which is so interesting that you're so okay. I guess it's because of their history, because for one, it's like, this is the daughter of her best friend, and obviously she cares about Carson too, but obviously when she looks at Nancy, she probably thinks of her best friend. She thinks of Nancy's mom, but it's a whole thing of like, for Nancy, it's like, you literally sent my dad to prison for something he didn't do. But, once again, Karen's like the knife and everything. And it's just kind of like someone innocent still died because of you. I'm glad my mom isn't around to see what you've become. And it is kind of sad to be like, I like that twist of it being Karen involved. It makes so much sense. It also adds an element to understanding how Josh easily got away, because Karen probably covered for him, because because if Josh goes down, he'll most likely take her down with him. But it's a whole thing of like, they were so certain that Ryan did this. So it's so interesting considering she did that whole play. That's the real messed up thing. She's involved in this whole thing, and she was there during the whole reenactment last episode with Ryan. So I think that adds this whole complicated thing of you had to be sweating bullets the entire time. But that's the thing, she was probably always nervous because she knew that Nancy was probably on the verge of figuring out, and obviously Carson's whole situation brought her an opportunity to bring him down. Well, more so that was about Lucy's murder, rather. That was more so in her mind, that was like, oh, I'm still getting justice for my friend in some shape or form, even though we made a mistake and killed an innocent person. Because, for Nancy, it's like, not only did you destroy one family, that being Tiffany's family, you destroyed mine too with this betrayal. Hell, even telling Carson about it, Carson's like, wait, what? No way. So that's a hard enough situation to kind of be dealing with. But it's like, we need a miracle of how to deal with this. There's also an interesting line. Well, we'll circle back to it later on, but I'm gonna bring it up. It's like you have Bess looking in the books and stuff like that with George and Owen, and she brings up the fact that, oh, look at our family, like, oh yeah, I was like, oh, I can't wait to learn about our first like oldest family member or something like that when it comes to Horseshoe Bay. And Owen was like, be careful what you wish for. She's like, what? He was like, nothing. I'm like, what the hell was that about? We'll get to it in a second. But basically, they had to perform a ritual to basically summon the Aglika, so that, because Nancy plans on using her wish to kind of find the bones, because if they can find the bones and the weapon, it can show that her dad wasn't, connected to the murder. So this is kind of a Hail Mary type of situation. Obviously, it's kind of like a blood ritual and everything, which Nancy doesn't want to get the others involved, but they all go, no. We've kind of been through stuff before. Yeah, granted, touching over to the spirit realm hasn't really worked out for us a lot in the past. But obviously, if it's for this sake, we're helping you out, we kind of been through so much already. So we got your back on this, Nancy. Even Owen's willing to help. So they end up making up their mind and they perform the ritual. Blood drops and everything. I even love Vess being like, this is so unsanitary. I was like, all right, so is this going to work or not? And it's like, let's see if it does. And then like a dark something starts coming towards him in the pool. I was wondering, I was like, is Nancy gonna be able to see it? It's like, nah, everyone sees it. And then the bones end up getting revealed as it pulls away. And it's like, oh, hey. Then they have to check and see what the price that has to be paid. She looks in the mirror and it shows Owen bling all from his head, meaning like, I guess his life. But then like, luckily they destroyed the thing that's kind of like the centerfold of the ritual, and end up saving Owen's life, but it started cutting from like his middle finger up until his arm, so that would have gotten nasty. But George is like, I wonder, did it pick Owen because he's a male, Marvin, he's one of the a male of one of the founding families. And then Nick brings up the point of, yeah, but was it enough? Now my mind about that is what he said earlier to Bess about their family and be careful what you wish for. To me, it makes it seem like the Hudsons aren't the only kind of messed up family. I think it's insinuating that the fact of the matter is the Marvin family has a very dark history as well, like you don't kind of want to learn about. Part of me wonders, is that what that was about? Like, is it some kind of retribution of like some crazy shit that the Marvin family did, like at the beginning when Horseshoe Bay was brought about? Part of me was also thinking maybe it could just simply be because the price that had to be paid was because this was Nancy's wish. Who does she care about the most? Owen. Like, that's kind of like who she's in love with, because obviously her and Nick had the very complicated thing. So that's what I'm wondering about. It's like it goes after the person you care about most, which once again, we saw Lucy's eyes bleeding. So like, what does she wish for? And obviously because her eyes were bleeding, it meant that it went through with the Aglika. So it's like, that's a whole thing in itself. So, Nancy and Owen, she's trying to like say I should leave, doesn't. They do their thing. Then you have like George inviting Nick over to her. It's like, well, because he can't get a hotel, can't stay at his old place because that's a crime scene now. And George invites him on a couch, and I'm like, oh, well, we already know there are hints of Nick and George, and obviously even Bess kind of picked up on that. So it's like, okay, so we're heading down that direction. But Nancy gets back home and she starts throwing up water, and she ends up pulling out that thing that they used in the ritual. So it's kind of like, because the whole thing is like they interrupted, so the full price wasn't paid. So it must be a thing that unless the price is fully paid, Nancy's going to constantly like suffer ramifications of it. Maybe it's going to be looming over her forever. Maybe the same thing for Owen, or maybe it's purely because like you got what you wanted without paying the full price. It's probably like alchemy. There has to be an equivalent exchange. They broke the pseudo alchemy, in this case, like using alchemy from Fullmetal Alchemist as an example. They stopped the transmutation from going through all the way, and only part of the price was paid, meaning there wasn't a balance, and it's seeking a balance. So either Owen's going to have to pay the price, but because Nancy's the one that made the wish, it might fall on her to kind of pay the price. So there might be, because even George kind of brings up the whole, well, I did kick over the bucket of blood, so it means, I'm dead by the, by the end of this year or whatever, within the year. So it's like, oh, that's still kind of looming over her, which she was like, well, what else do I kind of have to lose? But it's like, now it's also a situation of, because everyone else was involved too, does that mean rather than one person paying the price, they're all kind of going to have to pay the price unless Owen pays the full price? I don't know what to kind of make of that. We'll ultimately have to wait and see. But this is kind of where my thoughts are with, you know, all of this. We'll kind of have to wait to the next episode to kind of dive into it to find. I mean, especially the interesting aspect to it is Josh is still out, because that was the thing for Nick. It's like they figured this whole thing out, but they still haven't gotten justice for Tiffany, because the person who actually killed her, Josh, is still out there, and that has to be resolved first. So that's still kind of a part of this for Nick, and obviously for Nancy, it's finding Lucy's actual murder while also clearing her dad's name. Obviously, this whole thing with bringing, like, it can potentially, you know, Karen's arrest can potentially help, you know, bring into question any of her arrests that include Carson. It's one of those things of like, oh yeah, when like something comes up about a cop, like there's a potentiality of like you cross the line of certain things, it poisons the well of all your cases and kind of makes them all kind of get reopened. So it's kind of that similar thing. But also they do have Lucy's bones, and you know, obviously she's going to get her Emmy friend to kind of look into it to find out about it. But I'm really interested, like I said, to dive into this and find out. Once again, I don't believe Ryan had anything to do with this. I do believe his mom did. Once again, we will have to wait and see. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.